Okay, so hello and welcome to our presentation entitled The Forest Through the Trees, a summative evaluation of the tropical rainforest building here at the Woodland Park Zoo. I'm Catherine Kidwell, and behind me we have Catherine Canning, Anna Braden, and Mary Bond. So we already heard about the mission of the Woodland Park Zoo from the previous zoo team. And so for this project we focused on the tropical rainforest building at the zoo, which for the rest of the presentation we'll call the TRF. And the TRF houses animals from the African and South American rainforests, including an ocelot, golden lion tamarins, poison dart frogs, snakes, toucans, and many other tropical bird species. And so for our literature review, we focused on past evaluations at the zoo pertaining to visitor experiences and conservation messages. These prior studies are significant because they show a general disinterest or unawareness of the conservation signage by visitors, even though the visitors may proclaim that they're interested in conservation itself. They also show that the majority of visitors do not read many of the signs at the zoo.
So the zoo had three main areas of interest for our project from which we developed our evaluation plans. First, what is the level of visitor satisfaction with animal visibility in the exhibit? Second, what makes an experience memorable or enjoyable? And third, to what extent are visitors aware of WPZ's conservation efforts in tropical rainforest regions?
For this study, we focused on general zoo visitors, which meant that we didn't ask any school groups to participate. We used convenient sampling, so we asked whoever came along, and we collected a total of 109 surveys, and that includes the 9 rejections that we got. We pilot tested our instrument, and that was very helpful. We made just a couple of changes from that pilot testing. We removed 2 questions because they were somewhat redundant and awkward. And because we didn't make too many changes to the original instrument, we decided that the results were viable from the pilot study, and we included that in our final data analysis. Our instrument also included a word matrix, which we use when asking visitors our emotion questions. This was taped to the backs of our clipboards, and after the pilot testing, we also added photos of the ocelot and golden lion tamarins for visitor clarification. Our instrument was a brief 2 to 3 minute questionnaire. We interviewed visitors as they exited the TRF building. You see here an example of one of the questions from our instrument. This is one of our open-ended questions. So for 2 of our more open-ended questions, we built in a way to code visitors' answers as we conducted the questionnaire. So we recorded visitors' responses in the notes and comments column and checked off the categories that their answer fell into as they answered the question. We did this to help streamline data analysis for the limited timeline we had for the project.
So of the 100 visitors that we surveyed during the month of May, 49 were zoo members and 53 were not. However, some of the visitors who were not members had visited the zoo before, as 69 of them had previously been to the tropical rainforest building. The main reason people gave for visiting the zoo was overwhelmingly for recreation and entertainment, and of the visitor groups that we talked to, they were mostly made up of adult groups with children.
As you may recall, one of the things we were looking at was whether or not visitors were taking away the conservation messages in the building. So there are several conservation messages within the TRF building, but there are 3 that are really the most prominent, and they're listed here. 2 of them are about what the zoo is doing, and they are near the golden lion tamarins and the side-neck turtles. And then one of them is about what visitors can do, and that's primarily about buying shade-grown coffee, and that's located near the toucans. We found that almost half of visitors surveyed noticed messages about what the zoo is doing, but only 1/4 noticed messages about what they could do to help wildlife. However, the majority of visitors are not taking away any conservation messages from the TRF building. These charts here show a breakdown of the conservation messages visitors remembered if they reported having seen any at all. And there were quite a few visitors that reported seeing conservation messages, but couldn't actually remember what it was that they saw when they were asked the follow-up question. A few also said they saw messages outside of the TRF building. It seems that if visitors are noticing conservation messages, they are taking away the more prominent ones, with shade-grown coffee being the most noticed. This may be because of its location near the end of the exhibit. So we were also looking at animal visibility, and we had 4 animal-specific visibility questions. Those were about the ocelot and the golden line tamarins. And for both those animals, we were first asking what kind of view the visitors were getting, whether it was a full view, partial view, or no view at all. And just for our presentation today, I'll tell you a little bit about what we found for the ocelot. So after we found out if they had a full, partial, or no view, we compared that to the animal activity that the visitors were reporting. And it generated some interesting results. So the majority of the people for the ocelot described a full view, but that was followed very closely by the partial view. And then when we followed up with that question about what the animals were doing, the people who described a full view, the majority of them described the ocelot as exploring. And then a little over a third said the ocelot was sleeping. But then for the partial view, people, over half of them, actually 65%, said the ocelot was sleeping, and that compared to only 3% who said it was exploring. So there's definitely some insight into what constitutes a full or partial view based on what the animal was doing.
So in order to determine visitor satisfaction with the overall animal visibility in the TRF, we asked survey takers 3 questions. The first asked visitors if there was an animal in the TRF that they had wanted to see but couldn't. The majority said no, implying that they had seen all the animals that they'd wanted to. And for those who answered yes, we asked which animal they had wanted to see. The ocelot was the most popular response, followed by the golden line tamarins. We would like to point out that these 2 questions were asked immediately after our questions about visibility of those 2 mammals in particular, so that may have colored our results a bit. The third question in the series asked visitors to rank the overall animal visibility on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being poor and 5 being excellent. The majority of survey takers answered 4, followed by 5. And even visitors who described only partial and or no view of the mammals were still very satisfied with the overall animal visibility.
To help us understand what makes a visit to the TRF building enjoyable, we asked visitors to tell us what was their most enjoyable or memorable animal experience that they had inside the building. The top 4 exhibits were the aviary itself, and kind of lumped in with that were all the other birds that are in the exhibit. The toucans, the golden lion tamarins, and the ocelot were also among the top 4. The follow-up question asked visitors to explain why this was the most memorable or enjoyable for them, and the results of this question are shown in the graph on the slide. As you can see, animal visibility and animal activity were the top reasons given. It seems that these 2 things can play a big part in what makes an experience memorable or enjoyable for a visitor.
And the last question we asked visitors was to give us their 3 strongest emotions after leaving the TRF building. For this, we used the matrix on the back of our clipboards. It included 12 words total, including negative, neutral, and positive words. Happy was the most popular, followed by satisfied, and the negative emotions were, people reported negative emotions the fewest number of times.
So for the key findings, there was an overall satisfaction of the TRF building itself. There was high visibility ratings as well as positive emotions mentioned after going through the building. But there definitely was a connection between what animals were doing, the animal visibility, and then their enjoyment was contingent on that relationship. But also, people seem to be taking away some messages about what the zoo is doing and what they can do, but it was still less than half that were taking away any of those conservation messages at all.
So of our 109 surveys we had 9 rejections, so an 8% rejection rate. And there were some limitations due to our location. We collected the surveys right at the exit outside of the Tropical Rainforest building, and it's very hard to not create a bottleneck there. It's a very tight space, and so we tried to draw the visitors to the side. However, we would still, it was still very crowded and tight, and we would lose some potential survey takers. They would kind of get lost in the crowd there. We also learned from our pilot test that we had to be sure to phrase every question in terms of the Tropical Rainforest building, and though we did so for our final instrument, we still had visitors talking about animals and signage outside of the Tropical Rainforest building. The majority of our survey takers were with children who became distracting and to the survey takers, and so the survey takers didn't want to complete the surveys. But we did have stickers as bribes for the children, which proved to be very, very helpful. And finally, we were right next to the red-ruffed lemurs, which could also be quite distracting when they would start hooting and hollering and screaming at each other, and the visitors would all go over there and away from us.
So for the implications for the Woodland Park Zoo, there was an overall satisfaction, but the visitors are missing those conservation messages, and some of them are getting partial views. So the Woodland Park Zoo is definitely trying to develop naturalistic environments, as the other zoo group talked about, and making sure that animals still have good views of those animals, or visitors still have great views of the animals, but the animals feel safe. So continuing to do that is important, and then also some more research about the retention of the conservation messages and why visitors are noticing particular ones. And then there's also definitely a lot more room for statistical tests and kind of more in-depth analysis, because we definitely just did some descriptive studies. So that's it. So any questions?